never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or
Hello,
right.
everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dungeon Master of None.
It's the Dungeon Master None Radio Hour. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing. Hi, Rob. It's me. It's Matt.
Hi, Matt. Welcome. Thank you for introducing the Dungeon Master of None Radio Hour, starring DMs Matt and Rob, and special guest. That's your cue.
Oh, hello, it's me. Hey,
Sorry,
how's it going?
You don't have to do the bit.
Oh, it's
but...
me, Cinderblock Sally, coming in from West Coast Radio.
I like it.
Really. Hello.
I like it. Yeah, we have a special guest today, Cinderblock Sally, longtime friend of the pod, homebrewer, DM, creator, monster enthusiast, TikTok superstar of the D&D ecosystem. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it has been a while. I was thinking this morning. I remember a long time ago when I helped you guys edit an Artificer eons ago, and I remember that in writing that edit, I ended up spending much too much time on it because I was just having too much fun, and I think I was trying to throw like jokes into it and things like that, if I remember correctly.
You did,
yeah,
and they were appreciated and they were helpful. And
you
what's funny
treated
about
our homebrew as if it was like an episode of The Simpsons, the first draft, and you're like punching it up with
you're
jokes.
punching it up, which was helpful. Yeah. What's funny, I forgot that you were one of our editors and beta readers, which, by the way, thank you again. And it's just so funny. Obviously, we love that Artificer and all the work that we did on that, and then Wizards actually like went and made an Artificer after we spent all the time doing it ourselves, but that's okay. That's good.
Those dirty dogs. You
with
guys had one thing that theirs didn't have though, which was I think was a fun element, which was that if I remember correctly, they all had a pet element, correct? And I thought that was one of the things that I really liked. And I remember the shadow pet one was like, oh, that was the one that I want to play. And there's nothing there. The Wizards didn't steal that from you, which they should have.
If they had stolen anything, I would have loved for them to steal. You can have any type of pet.
Yeah, the Wizards Artificer has the little like walking cannon, but not as much the good cool pets. No, I did like that from our version, and that didn't make it into theirs, but that's okay. We'll let it slide this time, Wizards.
So, Cinder, you are a monster friend, not a monster yourself, a monster friend. And so I thought we could start off today filling the ears of all of our Dungeon Master listeners with some monster friends, some rare monsters. So we're going to pop open some booster sleeves and maybe find the rarest foil monsters that we all love to plop down in our games. But first, like, what is a cinder monster? Like, who are your guys? Who are your favorite little friends from the bestiaries, from the monster manuals?
Okay. So my favorite monsters and my monster friends, the ones that I would associate, the ones that like hang out with me after the show, are not the monsters that I'm going to use the most in game, but they are the monsters that I think I have the most fun with, which are the Beholderkin. The whole family of the orbs with many eyes. But I love a good beholder. But my favorite thing about beholders isn't anything to do with the stat block of them. It's the lore that when they dream, their dreams affect reality around them. So if a beholder dreams that it's snowing, they might wake up covered in snow. And the only way that beholders reproduce is they have a dream about another beholder. And that other beholder will appear potentially, and then there's another beholder. And if it appears right next to them, they'll immediately like fight to the death. So that's why there's not a lot of beholders. They don't even have a cloaca.
Ridiculous. No cloaca. How do they function?
But what I love so much about them, and I think it's the reason why I say this is they're completely bizarre. They're totally alien. They're completely out of this world. When you see one, you don't really know what it's going to be able to do, especially if it's not one of these, it's not like the standard beholder. And that reality bending thing isn't even a part of their stat block. It's just like in the lore of the world. So from like a dungeon master perspective, it's just a tool that you can literally do anything you want with, which is one of my favorite things in D&D. But the other reason why beholders are my favorite is because of a very specific creature, which is the spectator. And the spectator is a different sort of beholder. They're not actually summoned through dreams. They're summoned, a wizard or someone will like summon one to like guard a building, and they basically do that for 100 years. And they're completely crazy. They're very simple creatures, but they have one of, if not, I think, the best ability of any monster in D&D. And I don't mean best in terms of power. I mean best in terms of it's just, well, I'll tell you what it is, and I guess you guys can tell me what you think about it. But the ability is called Create Food and Water. The spectator magically creates enough food and water to sustain itself for 24 hours. There is not a, it's an action to do it, but there is not a time limit on it. It doesn't consume a resource, and it's very vague. Like, it's enough food to sustain itself for 24 hours, but could it do this every turn? And it's an ability that whenever I ask people about it, they say, oh, it's because they guard places. So it's a way to imply how they can eat. And my immediate first question is, then why doesn't like every giant lizard that lives in a dungeon have this power? You know what I mean? Like it answers a question that no one's asking. So I don't understand why it's there, but it is there, which means that it's a weird tool that we can use. And I have found myself using it more than almost any other beholder interesting power to create weird situations in games where you can have a spectator that's like a big fancy chef, or a spectator that makes people think it's actually going to be a really good guy because it's making food for people, or a spectator that goes crazy and like fills a dungeon with just plates and plates of food, so it turns into this almost like swimming through food fight situation. It's just the weirdest power, and I love it because it's stupid and it's amazing, and that's all I have to say about it.
I wanna pause on this because this is critical, because we've had long extended conversations, and many people do, about dungeon ecology, right? This is something that nerds like us think about all the time. It's like, okay, so this dungeon is full of goblins and, I don't know, vampires and oozes and blah 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 blah. What do they eat? Where do they go to the bathroom? Like, what, how do they function? And the spectator takes that question and is like, fuck it, it makes its own food and water. Like, shut up, nerd. It just makes its own food and water, and totally throws the whole question like out the window. But you're right, answers a question that was sort of being asked and has been answered in an entirely different way. But I have used spectators before, and I didn't know that I forgot that they had that ability. But I love it for the same reason that you do.
Yeah, now I'm just imagining like a spectator that was summoned in the kitchen of an abandoned dungeon, and the players stumble into it. It's filled with just plates and plates of dinner rolls that they have to, like those, like the dinner rolls you get at like a mid-tier family restaurant or something, or the dinner rolls you see in a Hallmark movie that look really unappetizing, and yeah, the players
like
are
cafeteria
just climbing
food.
over those.
I actually love this
rolls.
idea. The spectator can only create like cafeteria food, so you get like cardboard pizza and like gooey mac and cheese and Jello cups, and that's all that it can produce for you.
I'm thinking about this question, and I love that the spectator is your type of monster. For me, it's the complete opposite direction, which is one of the things I love about playing D&D. You can get a different DM, and the game feels completely different. For me, I have like two monsters types that I always go to, which is one, just a little lovely goblin boy, like a little goblin boys.
We love our goblin boys. We love our beautiful goblin sons,
children. And for me, the goblin is not like a creature that lives in the world and has an ecology. Like, it's a fey spirit. It's a demon. It's like it goes in there and eats like chickens, and the players always find like two goblins like foxes in the hen house, or like trying to steal people's cutlery and stuff like that. And they're just little, because I love doing like little nasty weird voices. And so I love goblins. And then of course I love like a mythological monster that was summoned by some crazy wizard, so some Wendigo or a demon or something like that. But I love my little goblin children.
Goblins are great. There's that famous, I don't know what we would call it, thought experiment, Tucker's Kobolds, about how to make, your kobolds more dangerous, how to turn these like CR 1/4 creatures into a real threat by having them use the terrain and traps and things. But I just think that works so much better with goblins. And I will present my players with goblins like well past their ostensible threat range, and they will hide and throw fire bombs and use poison arrows and have level 1 spellcasters casting entangle and sleep and other like incredibly annoying spells, and they hate it, and I love that. I love how much they hate fighting my goblins. It's one of my favorite things is I love a goblin boy too. I only realized this when we were preparing for this episode, but I realized that one of my go-tos, maybe not like the iconic Rob monster, but definitely one of them, is animated objects, is animated armor. The broom, the animated broom is a incredible like level 1 challenge. And I also just love villains that use animate object or animated objects like as part of their combat encounter. I have very nearly lost players over this propensity. They have really not liked some of the encounters, but I love that they can, it you do it once and your players spend the rest of the campaign like watching every suit of armor and every broom closet, and just in case something like springs out at them and attacks them. But I also think it's just like it can be like a really interesting encounter, especially if it's like they're like books flying at your players or something like that. Like it's a great like add-on to any number of other things. So that's something
animated objects also don't fuck around. Like
they don't.
A rug of smothering will wreck amid
they're
even
dangerous.
A party that doesn't understand how they work.
Yes, they are not joking. Like they do serious damage. They are major threats. Flying swords, all of this stuff. It's bad business.
On the other side of it, though, they also are one of the only things that I can think of off the top of my head in D&D where you can use logic to find their weakness, which is really nice. Like if you're like, okay, this is an object animated through magic. What if I cast a spell magic on it? And it says in the stat block, it just turns it off. There's not that many monsters that work that way. That have like, if you sort of extrapolate the logic, it's like, oh, this should work with this. Oh, it does. It says so.
And it feels very satisfying when they're like, oh, dispel magic stops the magically animated object from attacking me. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Or I've had an animated scarf in my game. I've had a archer player be like, I'm going to try and shoot an arrow through it to like pin it to the thing. Yeah, but they're very dangerous, right? They will choke you to death. But like that logic of like, oh, I know what a scarf. There's something about the animated objects. Everyone's like, I know what a table is. Mm-hmm. I may not know what a rimmeraz is, but I know what a fucking table is.
I know what a table looks like. Chop it. Yes. What do I do to stop a table from hurting me? Right. Yeah.
Right. It's so logical. And I feel like whenever we present our monsters, it's like we got to tap into our players' logic. And yes, very rarely do the rules of D&D reward this, but when they do, it's so nice. It's like, I understand what this thing is. It's a chair. It's a scarf. I can think about how my character would fight it.
If I'm playing a game with players that I know aren't like metagamey or like don't get into that headspace, and they try to logic out a situation where as a dungeon master, it doesn't work that way, but it should work that way, I usually just let it work that way.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of that, I know you had some favorite spells. 2 weeks ago, I had a player just, you got to lean into players, especially new ones who are in that headspace of, oh, this is how the world should work, right? Describe some monsters standing around a campfire. Player used Druidcraft to snuff out the campfire. Maybe it was too big for Druidcraft to actually do this, but fuck it, right? They're like, I'm gonna snuff out the fire, and the smoke will get into everyone's eyes. Perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one of my favorite cantrips because of that. Any favorite cantrips you love seeing players use just in fun ways?
Well, that's fun that you said Druidcraft is a good one. I think Prestidigitation is probably my favorite cantrip. Mostly because it can clean and soil clothing. I really like watching players soil each other's clothing. Because what does that even mean?
Right. You're dirty now.
In terms of
look at you covered in filth. What's the matter with you?
I think that my favorite.
It's
and
like
least
the
favorite
insult from Rush Hour. You're dirty. Clean yourself up, right? You can do that to people. You got blood on you.
Oh man, I think my favorite and least favorite is Minor Illusion, because when Minor Illusion is used well, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. Like you can show somebody what. I think the most clever use of it I've seen is people using it as like a photograph to be like, this is what this guy looks like. Okay, now we can show people like what the monster we're hunting looks like. So the wizard that they go talk to says like, oh, that's what this is. I can tell you about it now. But I also don't like it because it's also the spell that players most, I think, bend the power level of.
Oh yeah.
And I don't mind when players try to bend the power level of things sometimes, but with Minor Illusion, this might be totally illogical, and it might just be a crazy thing in my brain. But because I know that illusion wizards can bend Minor Illusion to make it more powerful, I feel like I shouldn't let everyone do it. Like if you wanted to go down the path of being an illusionist, you can, but you chose not to. And I don't want to pull that power away from the illusionist. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. No. And this is a great point because I'm very much as a DM, I'm a yes. I'm you want to do that? Absolutely. Go for it. And the spell that is used to test my limits and my generosity more than any other is Minor Illusion, hands down. And it's like, okay, I like your creativity. I like where your head's at. You're gonna, make a wall appear there, or you're going to, suddenly you're 10 feet tall or whatever. But I'm like, you cannot invalidate this entire encounter with a cantrip. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how creative your description is. There are finite limits on the powers of this spell. And it's frustrating because well used and well implemented, Minor Illusion is so cool and it rewards creativity. But I think players get high on that creativity reward and they want more of it. They just want to ride that high. They want to keep on using Minor Illusion to trick their way out of every encounter. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that.
The frustrating thing is if you move beyond its rules as it's stated in the spell and you give them a little bit, right? And you give them more, Minor Illusion can become a spell that solves everything, right? If you can create, if you are like a superhero that can create infinite illusions, there is no challenge you cannot surmount. And you want to say yes because it's such a thing that encourages player creativity. But if you say yes too much, you have created like that superhero that can just create infinite illusions.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also, again, there's not a lot that compares to it in terms of flexibility at the cantrip level. And so if you've got one player with Minor Illusion that likes to use it and another player with Firebolt, which is a great spell. Sorry, that's a bad example. Wait, Firebolt's a cantrip? Sorry.
Yes,
it is.
Right.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I got ahead of myself. Which is a great spell. It's a good cantrip. But they may suddenly, not be affecting the world as much as the illusion player.
You can only do two things: burn creatures and burn objects. That's about it.
That is it. What about Skywrite?
Well, Skywrite is, I think, potentially the most powerful low-level spell in the game. I yell about this from the mountaintops, and I feel like Critical Role is finally shedding a light on it with Keyleth doing the thing in Vox Machina. But it is... If you think about... Okay, I don't remember what it is offhand exactly, but it doesn't matter. You can write like a 10-word sentence or something like that, a 3-word sentence. You can write some amount of words in the sky. In a fantasy world where planes don't exist, where the gods actually have influence...
Up to 10 words in a part of the sky you can see.
Yeah, so the size is not even mentioned, okay? You can see a lot of sky, especially if you're high up.
Yep. So
in a world where there aren't planes, where there are divine forces at work, like with tangible outcomes in the world that you can't really question. This spell can change kingdoms. I mean, especially if you are playing, especially if it's a game world where magic is not known by everyone. Like there are just some, if it's super high magic, I guess it's less powerful. But even then, you could, like if you're getting into political stuff, you can just make a big, every single, it's a second level spell, I think. So if you're a high level wizard, you cast this spell a lot. And you just,
and it's a ritual.
You can just trash talk the king, right? You could just send spells trash talking the king all day, every day. That's going to have a huge impact on things. And that's like not even thinking about a clever way to use it. That's like the simple first thing I think of way to use it. Like you can break.
It could be the social media of a city. The players,
the marketing opportunities
where...
alone are just there's completely like second level spell. Like you could run a whole agency just selling your Skywrite services as a third level whatever. It's a wizard spell.
Yeah,
people are constantly posting right in a city. The entire sky is filled with advertisements.
Oh my god! That would be ridiculous.
I mean,
you could buy special arcane glasses that filter out the
filter
Skywrite
out all
spell.
the ads that you're constantly seeing in the clouds. I mean, there's lots of areas where a even like moderate magic world suddenly starts to fall apart, and in addition to create food and water, one of the things that makes one wonder why how society functions when any wizard can just like write king whoever eats dicks for breakfast in the sky. That's only like 4 words. You could write a whole bunch. You could say a whole bunch of more things about the king if you wanted to, however many times a day he feels like it. Skywrite also, now that you've like made me think about it, like my players are always obviously trying to figure out how to talk to each other and making use of the message spell and sending, and those are limited and expensive. But if you can just like write whatever in the sky, that solves that problem for, again, certain forms of communication, I guess, since everyone can see it.
Yeah, and if you're not going in the silly direction, if you're like, okay, how would I actually use this in the game? Is it actually that powerful? The things that I have used it for in the past that I think have worked really well is using it as a way for like a government's like city watch to like enforce things or to make known danger in the city in certain places, to like send like sort of like alarm messages. Or what I think the coolest use of it is, and the only way that this works is if the people that are playing don't listen to me say this right now, is to create a situation where you have like a weird cult that is worshiping this person that like it seems like that like nature and the world is like telling you that they are a god, and you just find out that they're just some random jabroni that learned the spell Skywrite and is casting it multiple times a day, and people don't realize that that's what's happening, and they're using it to sort of become like a strange cult leader. Because magic, because the gods exist. Who's to say? Who's to say what's making the clouds say what they're saying?
Right.
You could write in Windings to make it really confusing. I don't think it says which font it has to be.
Yeah. What god would use papyrus? Dark god.
I mean, and it says like a strong wind can disperse the clouds. So like, what do you have? Like, if it becomes a problem, do the powers that be have other wizards that are constantly casting like Gust of Wind to
What level spell is Gust of Wind? Is that second
I think
level
that's
too?
a third. It might also be a
first level spell, I thought.
Then it could outpace it in theory, because
it could.
You get
but
more
but it's not a ritual. It's not a ritual. So
the other thing though is that the Gust of Wind is only 60 feet by 10 feet. And as you mentioned, Skywrite can be as big as you want. There's no limits on the size. This is
how much of the sky you can see.
The more that I'm thinking about this, the more I'm realizing that's a major oversight on the size of Skywrite.
Yeah,
really
I mean, it is and it isn't, right? I do like when things are a little bit ambiguous, so long as everyone is like on the same page as like what the goal that you're doing at the table is.
Right. This is, I mean, I do think this has gotten a lot better, but there is a segment of the D&D community that will look for opportunities to exploit imprecise rules, and they've gotten a lot better about making sure that those corner cases aren't there so that they can't do bonkers things. But Skywrite absolutely does not clarify how large the message can or can't be, and I would place limits on that as a DM. But rules as written, it could be as big as you feel like.
I'm into it.
All right,
Big old 8 equals capital D, just like spreading
Just
across
like
the sky.
right across the sky. Yeah.
The limit is you can only use Unicode characters. You got to be a little creative here. All right, let's dust our sky off. Let's blow these clouds away and talk monsters. All right.
Talk monsters.
So
some more?
let's talk underused monsters.
Yes.
Here's what I want to do is pass the talking stick around, and everyone give us, we'll take turns going a couple times. Everyone give us a monster that you feel like is underused or a clever situation to use a fun monster. I'm happy to go first. Lock it in. Here we go. Okay, Rob already mentioned animated objects earlier in the episode. I want to put a pitch out there for awakened creatures, shrubs, trees, foxes, kangaroos, any animal you have. And these are usually encountered, right, as a single thing. Here's one awakened tree. Here's one awakened bear. Have your players stumble into a hex or a couple acres of valley where every single thing is awakened. Every tree, every animal, and then the situation can go from there. There's a war between the canines, the foxes and wolves, and every other creature. How are the players going to negotiate this? Awakened land. Have fun with it. Get your Narnia on.
We've talked about this before, Matt. I love awakened creatures, and I think there's a ton of potential. Especially, you extrapolate, like, what does an awakened shrub or tree,
what does it want?
What does it want? What does it desire? Like, what motivates an awakened creature? And I think there's absolutely like a lot of, especially with like animals too, just a lot of like really interesting situations here, both for challenge, right? These are creatures that want to harm the party, but also interaction. They have something to share, or could be potential allies. I think Awaken is another spell that the existence of has massive implications for the world at large that are largely unexplored.
But it's also, isn't it only, it's like a 5th level spell, and isn't it locked to druids in terms of who can actually do it?
It is.
That's true.
I
feel like that helps. I feel like
Yeah.
that helps build out sort of where, like, when I think of an awakened forest, my first thought is, why is it awakened? Like, was this
Exactly.
something that like somebody intentionally tried to do? Was this like there was a druid that lived here a long time ago and awakened some trees and is like in power over them, or like, you know, like died eons ago or moved on, and now this society has sort of evolved out of these things that have been like, I like it as that. That's where my mind goes. Like, what awakened these creatures? And you can build. You know, my favorite D&D stories are the ones that have an air, not necessarily of mystery, but like of discovery to them, even if it is just going to the place and fighting the thing. And I think that if you have like an awakened woods, that why is this forest awake, or maybe now it's suddenly angry and it wasn't before, is a very compelling, interesting thing to play around with and dive into.
Yeah, there could be a dead druid spirit that lives on that is powering the awakened thing. This could be threatened. This could be protected by the players. Or it could just be a fun negotiation between different awakened factions in a forest, right? Great for building factions of the ancient enemies of trees versus squirrels. Can they live in peace if they're all intelligent creatures?
Good point about the druids. That does force you to think about, why was this creature awakened? Though, with that in mind, not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not evil, but antagonistic druids are actually some of my favorite villains. And there's, a mad druid going around and awakening things, should be
awakening the
awakened.
entire king's stables of horses or the cavalry's horses, and now the like soldiers can't. They have to negotiate with their mounts.
with their steeds. That's a good idea. Oh, that's good. Awakened creatures. There's so much potential
Also for silliness.
for silliness, of
The
course.
silliness too.
Well, this is
You give them all a bunch of vests, everybody's having a good time.
Everyone's having a good time.
All awakened animals must dress like Winnie the Pooh or Daffy Duck. Vests and shirts
No pants.
only. No pants.
No pants.
No pants, little vest, maybe a shirt, maybe a little hat.
I threw in an awakened horse in one of my campaigns. I don't even remember why. I think somebody was like, "Can we talk to the horse?" And I was like, "Actually, sure. It's awakened." And then I had to keep that NPC for the rest of the campaign because every single session they were like, "We want to talk to the horse." And so let this be a lesson to you, DMs. Be wary of the creatures that you include in your campaigns.
All right, pass the talking stick to someone else. Give us a pitch for a weird or unusual monster.
All right, I'll take it. What do you guys think about the star spawn?
I love the Star Spawn. I'm a big Star Spawn fan, but
So-
tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, so I think that the star spawn are a perfect example of how to make a high level party challenged and how to make a party when you're in that situation that many of us find ourselves in as dungeon masters, where our party has way too many powerful magic items. They're only level 10. Somehow they're taking on adult dragons. Like things seem off and you're like, how do I recalibrate this? The star spawn. Because what the star spawn do is there are a couple really high AC ones, I think, but for the most part, they're all fairly mid-tier AC. But if you look closely at what their abilities are, they really, really synergize in these devastating ways. So, for example, they all have abilities that sort of interact with each other. It's also one of the reasons why I like them so much is I point at them whenever I am trying to get somebody to think about like how to use monsters in synergy together, because it's built into how they work. So like the star spawn Gru, which is the littlest of the star spawn, it's terrible. It's not a good creature, but when it is within proximity of the adventurers, they have disadvantage on attacks against other star spawn that aren't star spawn Gru. So if there are, you can't attack the big scary one because you're gonna have disadvantage. I mean, you can, but otherwise you're gonna smash these little guys. And if they do get a hit off, they can give their friends advantage on attacks. So, for example, one of the other star spawn is called the Mangler. Okay, and it basically is it's like a stalking creature, and it has this thing where its attacks are fine, but if it has advantage on its attacks against the thing that it's attacking, it does like twice as much damage as psychic damage. So if you throw that in with the star spawn Gru, you find yourself in this situation where they're able to just get off these massive hits. Or like there's one called the Behemoth, I think, or the Hulk. And basically whenever it takes any psychic damage, it just explodes psychic damage. That psychic damage just happens to every creature around it. And then you have other star spawn that shoot psychic damage. So you can be in a situation where you just throw a Hulk out into the middle of a party and have the guy that shoots psychic damage not shoot the players, just shoot the Hulk. And suddenly it's going to hit, and then the players just get hit by this like nova of psychic damage. So it creates this, it's just one of them. They are terrifying creatures to fight. They wreck parties, and they mix so well together mechanically. I don't often see monsters that, even if they're all of the same type, that so intentionally are built to work together without them exactly saying, hey, you have to do it this way. But if you read how they work, you're like, ooh, this is going to be, let's put the players in their place for a second. Or let's, like bring the fear of the Eldritch in. That's I also love a good Eldritch horror in the middle of a fantasy campaign. So I always lean towards that stuff.
They are the darkness behind the stars. And yeah, so many monsters in the monster manual, the different versions are sort of like, here's a different version for different levels of party, right? And these work really well together, all in the same encounter.
Well, this is a great example, because the other problem that you run into with high level parties that, dumpster adult red dragons or whatever, is that there's an action economy problem, right? And so these days, when I'm trying to build a challenging encounter, it is always many monsters rather than one big scary one. And especially if you can put together a crew of Starspawn or something else, that especially if they work together well, that's so much more challenging than one big hefty baddie. And I love the synergies that you just described. That sounds really terrifying. And Matt's right. Oftentimes the different levels and different versions of a monster are just, this is a bigger, badder, higher CR version of the same thing, rather than this has different abilities that function deliberately with other versions of this creature. God, are there anything else that works that way? There are a few things that are sort of designed to appear in tandem and play off of each other.
I can't think of any immediately off the top of my head. That's at least not that are they are pages next to each other in the monster manual. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's I can't think of any. I have to think about it more. Most of the things I can think of are in weird expansion books or third-party things that I don't think count when we're talking about the official published material.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one thing that Pathfinder always did or does a little bit of a better job of considering, is how things might work in tandem or work with each other. But that's
pack tactics, right? There's pack tactics, which a lot of things have, but that's not really a unique.
No, and that's kind of a low effort version of what you. I mean, not bad low effort, but giving something pack tactics is easier than saying these are two distinct abilities that work together when these monsters appear as a group. So mine's a lot less interesting than this, and I don't. I don't even know if this is necessarily underused, but I really like owl bears. And I think that owl bears tend to show up as...
Oh, yeah, a rare monster. There's only plushies and stickers. And they've only had their art redesigned 20 times. It's okay.
How they tend to be used in the game tends to just be, it's an owl bear, and you fight the owl bear. But I'm mostly interested in them because, yes, they're horrible and adorable, but also, what the fuck would an owl bear be like? I know how a bear behaves. I know how an owl behaves. How does an owl bear behave? What's the sort of natural inclination and behavioral patterns of an owl bear? And by the way, I don't know the answer to this. Do owl bears, do they lay eggs? Do they
cough up owl pellets?
Do they cough up pellets, right? Or do they pass, their waste like a bear does? Do they hibernate? Are they nocturnal, or are they not? These are questions that I have about owl bears. Anyway,
Can you imagine an owl bear pellet? Have you guys ever in science class? Did you guys do the thing where you take apart an owl pellet and find?
Yes, I did.
Oh my, that would be such a cool thing to put into a game, but so gross in real life. Now
I'm thinking
you drop a human skeleton in an owl bear
pellet. Yeah,
your players.
You could find an amulet in it or something too. Oh, that would be so cool.
Now I've decided that owl bears do produce pellets. I've decided that this is canon in my games. But I think that the way that they're mostly presented is this is in some magician's laboratory, or it's got a lair in the wilderness or whatever. But I think that being hunted by an owl bear, or having to sort of, especially a low level party, having to navigate or deal with a large, dangerous, unpredictable predator, it would be is a lot more interesting than it is usually presented. And I guess Matt's right. This is a very not a rare monster. It's very common. It's been redone 1,000 times. But that's what's interesting to me is rethinking the way that the owl bear is used. I think that there's a lot of potential to do some interesting things there.
Okay, here's another, I think, common monster that I think needs a little more love. When you look at demons and devils, right, your fiends, and you look at the one that is like kind of challenging for a first or second level party, you stumble across the bearded devil. And the bearded devil is like kind of has, at least in 3rd edition and a little bit in 5th edition, just kind of like goofy art, like a purple guy with just like green beard tentacles coming out of its face. And one of my favorite things to do with a devil is instead of putting it in a giant army or having it be a lieutenant for like an evil spellcaster or monster, things you can absolutely do is I love having like demon or devil possession in my games, right? You want to figure out why this person is bad or evil. Oh, it's a fun mystery. They've been possessed by a devil. And I would make the case that the bearded devil is a great, like you have a first or second level party, a great, this person is actually possessed by a bearded devil, and you reskin them as this person has the stats of a bearded devil because it's got magic resistance. So it gives a little challenge to your spellcaster, and it fits with, oh, this person is resistant to my divine cleric spells. 2, it's got a 1 powerful attack. It has the little beard attack secondary thing, which you can easily reskin as like a tail, a tentacle, a whip. And then 3rd, it's a great low-level challenge for players because they're resistant to damage except from silvered weapons. So if you want to do that, all right, it kicks our ass the first time we need to run away and like, learn and do some research. It's a great teaching opportunity. And I think it works best as like, oh, this is the devil that will possess your first level warlock who is dabbling in too much. So, bearded devil possession stories. Go for it.
I like the bearded devil too. I used one in a game recently. They're cool because they're, like Matt said, they're more reasonable CR than a lot of demons and devils, and you can introduce them, without if your party's going to fight a pit fiend, there has to be a pretty good reason for why there's a pit fiend anywhere for any particular reason. But a bearded devil is a lot easier to fit into a lot of campaigns.
Also, just to go back to what you said, Matt, about how all of the magical resistance and damages resistance come into play. That's a great way to think about how to take these abilities that often I feel like as a DM you sort of gloss over and just sort of accept they're there and make them like a compelling plot point. Where, especially if it's not like, oh, a devil appears out of a puff of evil smoke and people are like, all right, it's magic, we're going to fight it. But if you see like a person that you knew was just a person and just a change comes over them and then suddenly they're fighting you, and when you stab them, it doesn't really work. It's not like, oh, they're a devil. This is this. This is this. This is this. It's a mystery to solve.
Yeah.
And suddenly this defensive ability that this creature has that oftentimes is only there like as oftentimes if you don't like bring it to the table in the right way, it just kind of makes players frustrated, becomes like a clue to the mystery that they have to figure out and overcome. That's a very cool. I like that idea so much. Really cool.
Escapes. They have to collect its blood. They can analyze it. Oh, okay. When I drop in some colloidal silver into it, the blood fizzes. Perfect. Okay, let's go buy some silver weapons, make some silver weapons, and try and hunt this sucker down.
So speaking of monsters, I have a bridging thing here. Cinder, you're as I mentioned, a TikTok creator. And
I am a TikTok aficionado.
Yeah, large number of subscribers and views, and I want to ask you about that, but as sort of like a way of moving from one topic to another. Speaking of monsters, you had a TikTok that I liked about how absurd beasts are in
Yeah.
D&D, and I
they're so silly.
was wondering because somebody posted something about a specific. Well, here's the thing. So, like, for example, a cat,
Yeah.
cats, a CR0 creature, a cat
Meow.
I've
Yeah.
heard of them.
does 1 slashing damage on
Mhm.
on hit, and it's got a +0 to hit, but that means that a dozen cats, like a pack of feral cats, has an extremely good chance of murdering like most commoners in a single round. Like if you are ambushed by a pack of feral cats, you are very likely to die
Oh, yeah.
before you can even act, which is, not probably like how dangerous cats are in reality, but there's a lot of things that are very silly about D&D monsters, but beasts especially. There's some just super goofy things.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I'm sure there's logic behind some of it. Like you could argue that they are the way that they are to make it so it's balanced for Druid's wild shape, or that like at a certain point going below 1 hit point or 1 damage is redundant, assuming that you're like hitting something as hard as you can with a sword. But yes, they're so stupid. It's so silly. And it's a perfect example. I mean, I use it as an example of whenever anybody wants to argue with me about using real life in the context of D&D for rules, I just tell them, so a crab and a sheep have the same amount of hit points in D&D. So are we really worried about this?
Right.
Because that to me is one of the craziest things. I got the idea to do that. I am not everyone is stealing from everyone all the time, so we must be honest about that. But I saw a post on Reddit that was talking about the jump mechanic in terms of beasts, because in D&D, using the jump mechanics in D&D, a cat cannot jump at all. It just can't.
Right.
But
Doesn't
an
have the
elephant
strength.
can jump like 8 or 9 feet up in the air.
Wait,
Which
what?
elephants? Yeah. So because
Elephants
jumping is
can't
based
jump.
on
Everyone
yeah,
knows that.
Yeah. Because jumping is based on strength. So I was like, what else is
Right.
there? So in my because they have like it ends up, if you do the math of jumping, they can jump 8 feet up in the air, I think, or 9 feet up in the air, which is just silly. So I was like, okay, what else is there? So then I just started going through the beasts, and I noticed a bunch of other things, and I tried to point out things that weren't things that I heard a million times, because everyone points out that like cats don't have dark vision. That's like the first thing that everyone goes to. But there's just all sorts of silly stuff like
The crab and the sheep. That's a good one.
also same as a commoner, 5 hit points.
There should
I'd
be
say
crab herders.
I think I'm probably harder to kill than a crab, but I don't
just don't understand why a crab doesn't have 1 hit point. It's a crab. Like a rat, it's like, why all the little animals having like 1 or 2 hit points kind of makes sense, but why does the crab get more?
It's got a shell. I don't know.
A lion and a tiger can both jump, but only one of them can pounce or something stupid like that. I don't know. It's the kind of thing where, to me, it is just the perfect example of why you shouldn't use real world logic to argue D&D, because at the end of the day, at the core of the game, it's just not that. You know what I mean? Like it's just not that at all. Yeah. It's silly. It's silly times.
Yeah, there's no way, back in 3rd edition, there was no way that, like, for example, a horse could easily grapple and take down basically everyone but a fighter, right? I mean, there are no limits on grapple. You don't have to have hands to grapple. So,
That's right.
horses and other large mount type creatures, camels, etc., could easily grapple with and just sit on anyone.
I mean, that's a great point. We talk about this all the time, but like, you should not be arguing realism in D&D under any circumstances, but especially not when it comes to monsters or monster behavior, or like combat is already like very abstracted, but like sometimes people get very fixated on certain parts of it, rather than it's very silly. So now that we've broached the subject, tell us about the TikToks. Tell us about the clock app. Cinder,
Ooh.
what's it like?
Well, let me tell you, it is the best app if you want all of your information just going to places you don't know where it's going. So if you're trying to connect with people that you're never going to meet that want to collect data, it's the app for you. But it's also pretty fun. For me, the reason why I got into it was I have very little like technical knowledge about how to produce content in terms of like cameras and videos and editing. And it is a way, it just does all of that stuff. So it just made it super easy. But yeah, I don't know. I like making videos that do most of my content is either like ways of reflavoring things that already exist without changing the mechanics, or just like, I don't know, things in the D&D world that I think about that I think might be useful to people. I try to imagine that it is largely like dungeon master advice or player advice, but at this point now it's also just full of silly bullshit too. I just did a whole series where so have you guys been watching? You guys know Critical Role's new show, The Legend of Vox Machina?
We're familiar. As we mentioned on a previous episode, it's not for us, or it's not for me, but
I've been enjoying it.
Like that it exists, and I'm happy for the people who are enjoying it. I lack the attention span, so but here's the thing: I wanted to hear what you had to say about it because I'm very interested in it, and I'm curious about what your take on it is.
Well, I should hope that you're curious what my take on it is. I'm a very important person, as you
said
are.
Earlier. You're a TikTok superstar.
So it's fine. I got into
like it. You don't have to
largely...
defend it. I
no.
liked
Listen,
it. Yeah,
listen.
Yeah.
I got into D&D through Critical Role, so I've been a fan of theirs when they were back on Geek and Sundry and had terrible sound quality. I've been listening to them for a while.
OG days, yeah.
Yeah.
That's when I listened to them too, like watched and listened. So I love that old like Critical Role.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, you fall in love with at the end of the day, you fall in love with people playing D&D together more than anything else.
They're having a good time. It's nice to watch. Yeah.
So the cartoon show I think is very fun, very good. There's some things that I don't think translate well from the game to the show, but it's sort of whatever. Like you can't imagine that everything is going to like. So like for example, Sam Riegel is the voice of Scanlan, who's like the little bard, and he was like that actor is incredibly funny. Like he is such a funny improver, and I think his character is not as funny in the show as he is in real life. So like his quick improv style comedy and the way that he could just bounce off of the other players, it was more funny watching him as a person crack those jokes with his friends than watching an animated version of his character crack those jokes in the context of outside of the context of a D&D game, for example. But I like the show a lot. I think it's very good. But I've been doing a series on TikTok where I just talk about the show as if I don't have any context for it. And I give as many wrong pieces of information as I can. And because it is so near and dear to so many people have so many feelings about it, it just really riles people up. And it reminds me of like when I was a little kid and I would make prank phone calls. But it feels like a way that I can do that as an adult that isn't like hurtful and isn't like targeted. Because it's just so for example, I call it Vox Machina. The whole premise of the series is that I basically am like, hey, there's this new show on Amazon Prime. It's pretty good. There's too many main characters, and it kind of reminds me of a D&D game. So I thought if I described the characters as if they were D&D characters, it would help you understand them in the show. And obviously, it is based off of that. But immediately, like 3 seconds in, everybody's furiously angry. And then I proceed to use like very random bits of details from the show to describe each of them as the wrong class. And like one of the characters' name is Grog. I just call him Greg. I talk about how Pike is his daughter, which she's not. She's like his friend. So so that's one of the best things about TikTok is that
you're doing it. You're doing a Ken M. You're.
I don't know who that is, but I'll accept it.
Advanced trolling is Ken M posts in, or I don't know if he's still around anymore, but he posts in like Facebook groups, like obviously like misunderstanding the point of everything and making people really furious.
It's the best.
It's really funny. It's
the best way to troll because the thing is, as adults in the world, you shouldn't really troll people.
You shouldn't be mean when you're trolling, but but jokes
Yeah,
are funny.
Exactly. And I think we were talking about this. Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. It's a way to not say, "Hey, you're dumb." It's a way to have you step forward and say, "Excuse me, good sir, I'm dumb," and it's
That's
amazing.
right. You have to volunteer to look foolish with trolling.
And
is the
then
thing.
and then
Yeah,
people
you
get
have to
like
take the
really
bait.
angry. Yeah, people get so and people say like mean. The best is when people like one person. People will write really mean comments about it because they're like getting really upset, and then you just like pin the really mean ones.
That's. I mean, I'll send you a link to Ken M's greatest hits. You'll appreciate it. Your kindred spirits.
All right, cool. So
but-
yeah, I don't know how much I'm gonna keep doing that because that might have just been like a little bit of a magic moment that I had. Most of the stuff that I do is more like, hey, let's talk about this monster, or hey, you want to play a gunslinger, but you're playing at an Adventure League game. Here's a way to reflavor a warlock to be a gunslinger, so you can still follow all the rules. I do that's usually the kind of stuff I get into.
Well, and your
that sort of
most
thing.
I think your most popular video, and it's I'm not I want listeners to go and watch it for themselves because it's really cool. But it's a really great short description of how to run a false Hydra,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I really liked it. It's such a specific instance, and I don't know when I would ever. Well, I do now that I've watched it. I actually do. I'm like I'm going to put a false Hydra in one of my games, but like it's such a cool idea for how to run a particular monster and encounter, and so that's really cool. You have a bunch of good stuff like that. I enjoy your TikTok content.
Well,
And
I
we talked-
appreciate that.
we talked about this. There's a couple of different types of TikTok creator, right? There's old nerds like us who are talking about running games, how to be a DM, tactical stuff, and then there's
And posting thirst traps.
That's right. Yeah.
You guys didn't mention any of my thirst trap videos.
I did not mention. I want people to go see for themselves. And then I would categorize them as a younger crowd that's more performance cosplay vibes, feels based D&D, which and this is not a criticism or endorsement of either, but I enjoy. I like to get like a little bit of this is what I like about TikTok. I'm like I just pull it up and I'm like just blasted with information and ideas, and sometimes not the ones I want, and sometimes not what I'm looking for, but I'll usually like learn or see something cool if I swipe enough times. And it's we probably our least popular episode ever was when we watched and discussed some TikToks on the episode, but our listeners, you know what, listeners, you're gonna have to get with the times. You're gonna have to download TikTok and watch some because
it's you don't have to do that. It's a hellscape, guys.
it's all a hellscape.
That
If
was
you've
the
survived
early
without
days
it.
of D&D TikTok where no one knew what to do.
Yeah.
And it was in the early days of D&D TikTok where the only TikToks that existed was the Simpsons stand-up comedian, like Rangers drive like this, but like barbarians drive like this.
Sorry, one of those was really terrible. Yeah, it was like, yeah. Fighters be like this, but bards be like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot of skit stuff.
Yeah.
I dabbled in that for a hot second. I'm not. It's you know what it is. It's so much. It's so much work to make something that's so like meh at the end of it. Like unless you like are really like have an awesome costume that you have or like some crazy like it's just too stupid for too much work. Like I would so much rather just like talk about something I've been thinking about for an hour or reminisce on a weird thing that happened in a game that I was running and try to be like, what can I learn from this? It takes like a tenth of the time to record it, and I feel like it's much more interesting content at the end of the day.
I think that's what people want, and I think that's what TikTok is probably best used for. I feel bad for the people. I feel bad for people everywhere who put effort into things and then watch
Well,
people.
listen, some of it's not bad. There's
Not
definitely
that you
some
not
people
that you
out
don't
there.
not that you don't put effort into things, but
No,
you know,
I don't put that much effort into things.
I
Let's
feel
be honest
bad
here, guys.
for people who I like, who I respect, who do put like a ton of effort into costumes or design or editing or whatever. And it's, you know, if you do it for the love of it, then good for you. It's just, it's got to be rough out there. Well, it's rough out there for a hardworking independent creator, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you don't, I agree with that sentiment very much. Like the people that I like that do that kind of stuff that's more like skits and just like silly things, they are clearly people that are having a wonderful time doing it. And they're people that are going to be making those costumes anyway, and probably were just doing those skits to the people that they live with before they started filming them on TikTok. But for me, I don't know. I have to. I'm forcing it when I have to do that. So I just lean into the stuff that's more fun for me. Yeah. To go back to what you said about that false Hydra thing. Also, like, I don't know. For me, D&D is at its best when it's like cinematic feeling, and that's definitely not true for every game. Like that's not going to be everybody's bag. But I feel like a lot of the time, what I'm just aspiring to do is try to come up with ideas that are going to make players feel unique things in a moment, which is a very vague sentence now that I'm saying it out loud. But like at the end of the day, like that false Hydra idea, the whole gimmick of that idea is like, okay, if there's a monster that actually eats memories, how the hell can you make someone feel that? That's an impossible thing to make someone feel. I don't want to have my players fight a monster that I can't have them somewhat genuinely sit in the position of their players in. So like that was like a way that you could try to give someone that feeling of like, okay, if you were actually going to encounter this magical force. That's why I feel like a lot of the time when I am using monsters or magic in D&D, I don't explain what it is. You just experience it. Like going
Right.
back to the silliness of Skywrite, I would not tell my players, oh, you see someone is casting Skywrite and it's making the clouds be weird. I would just describe the clouds being weird and all these people bowing down to this, weird guy waving a staff in the air, because you want them to feel what it would feel like to be there. But that's not for everybody. A lot of people like D&D a little bit more video gamey or a little bit more tongue in cheek, or so if it's your bag, it's your bag.
It's all about for me as a dungeon master, not pulling the veil back as much as you can, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't say it's a bearded devil, right? You say this person now has a horrible demon face.
Yep.
And your attacks aren't hurting them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? And then finding those, moments where you can say there's a bunch of termite mounds here, but the termites are ghosts. And it seems like they're climbing trees, right? And they're like ethereal termites. What are they trying to eat, right? Or you come into an ancient battlefield and it's filled with hermit crabs that live in the helmets of the warriors, right? Getting weird and crazy with it.
I liked what you said. I don't think that it's like obvious or dumb at all to say that you like want D&D to be cinematic. It's a little bit like saying art is supposed to make you feel things, because like, yeah, no shit. But also it's sometimes a thing that you have to remind yourself or sort of like set as an intention. And I totally agree that like what I really want is to really bring my players into the moment. And sometimes that can be we're laughing and having a good time and goofing and they're invested. And sometimes it can be, this climactic moment has finally, I've managed to draw them in with my description and with this mystery that I've been building. And that's a real challenge. And that's what I liked about your false Hydra description, is how do you build the suspense? And Matt and I have talked about this a ton because we did a bunch of episodes on horror and running spooky games, and it's hard. It's not easy to get your players invested, to spook them, or to make them feel anything. If it was easy, it would be more people would do it. But I totally agree with that sentiment, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, horror is hard in D&D. You have to like have a certain amount of trust with your players also, and they have to with you. Mm-hmm. And then you have to like almost play with that trust a little bit and be like, they trust that you are going to fuck with them. It's a weird thing, and it's honestly, I truly think that it's not for everybody, and I think a lot of people that think it's for them, if they were in the middle of it, might not like it as much as they would think that they would, because I feel like horror. How do you make someone feel fear in D&D? Aside from like mystery and the unknown, it's messing with their agency, which is not something that like people actually want at all.
Right.
Like it's but it is the way. If you want to make someone feel uncomfortable in D&D, you mess with their agency. And that's something that like is so opposed to everything in the zeitgeist that like it's not even like a thing that people want to broach as a topic. I made a video a little while ago of a way to fuck with your players, where basically the idea was, if you want to make them feel paranoid, send each of them a text message, like they're going on a trip or something, and send each of them a text have them each roll a die, doesn't matter what they roll, and then send each of them a text message and say, you're not the doppelganger. And you send that to every one of them before they like go on a mission somewhere. But what that is going to do is, if they don't expect you to fuck with them in that way, like if you have a relationship with them where you can mess with them and they're cool with it, that will sow extreme paranoia in a way that you wouldn't be able to necessarily just make them feel otherwise, because at the end of the day, they do know it's a game. They do know they all want to survive. So there's not really a reason that they wouldn't trust each other. And that lack of trust and paranoia is often like a big part of the sort, especially if you're out. This was in the context of a The Thing sort of game. So like to sort of create that sense of like isolation and paranoia, that's a really good tool. But people also will hate that idea, and there will be a lot of players that if they realize that that's what you're doing, they're not gonna trust you anymore, and it's gonna like mess with the larger ecosystem of your table. So it's a dicey game to play. I generally don't do too much horror outside of like visual description and like things happening in the world as sort of like grotesque or like horrific imagery kind of stuff with like eldritch things. I like that. Eldritch always makes its way into my game. I can't help it. But because of that, because I want my players to trust me, and I have one group that doesn't care if I fuck with them, and I do sometimes, but most of them, you know, they want me to be the dungeon master. They don't want me to be manipulating them. And I want them to have as fun a game as possible. So, you know, a lot of my players also just really aren't into horror like at all. Like they'll fight a Cthulhu, but they're going to be making jokes while they're fighting.
They don't want to be spooked. Yeah. And this is what we talked about in our episodes. Yeah, you got to have buy-in. You got to have a party and players that want that. And you're right. Sometimes they think that they want that, but don't enjoy it in practice. I mean, it's when you go see a scary movie, you know what you're getting into. You went to go see The Conjuring 5 or whatever. You're not like angry because it's scary, because that's what you knew what you were getting into. But sometimes it's a lot more challenging to get that buy-in and that right there, get that, you know, feel right with D&D sometimes.
Have you guys ever played a Call of Cthulhu?
Oh, have we ever? Matt has run. We're gonna get off topic, but Matt has run Call of Cthulhu for me a bunch of times, and I have been both scared and had my agency utterly removed multiple times. And but that's what I love that. I love dying in Call of Cthulhu. That means that I did it right. That means that I sufficiently engaged with the horror that I am encountering. And yeah, Matt has killed me on at least one occasion, maybe 2 or 3.
At least. Rob must always die. It's you're the
I'm the
you're
sacrificial
the red shirt
lamb. Yeah, I'm the
all
red
of
shirt.
My games.
Cinder, we could obviously go on all day, but this has been really terrific. Other than TikTok, which we'll link to, anything that you want to plug, anything that you're working on?
Sure. I stream on Twitch. I'm trying to stream more right now. I'm streaming about 2 or 3 times a week, and what I basically stream is a writing workshop where people post homebrew that they're working on in my Discord, and I review it on stream, sort of as if we were doing like a creative writing class.
Oh, cool.
And I encourage them to come on, and I will, if they are comfortable with it, we'll hop in a call and talk about it afterwards. But yeah, the idea behind it is I'm trying to get people to think about D&D writing and just, you know, get their ideas out there. And usually what my goal is if you have an idea that you want to make, how can you make it in such a way that if it was given to a stranger that would not have a conversation with you or anything, that they would let it in their game. So it's pretty fun. So we do that, and then we also just So
it's finally an
about D&D
opportunity
stuff a little
to
bit.
earn your DMFA, your Dungeon Master of Fine Arts. and
Exactly.
creative writing.
And it's so it's like it's a much smaller D&D homebrew community than there's other ones that you can find that have like hundreds and hundreds of people, but it's a fun little spot. The Discord, if people want to join it or hop into any of the Twitch visits. We did a Valentine's Day one where we did a date, and we did a tier list of which D&D classes would be the best to date while I drank very bad wine. But normally we do like writing workshop type things. Yeah.
Cool. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. It's on the internet. Twitch.tv.
We'll link to it in the show notes. We'll make sure that we got a link to it.
Yeah. It's it's World Wide Web, the HTTP one.
That's right.
Not the local web.
It's online.
Yeah. And that's about it. I'm working on some podcast stuff with some people. I've got a buddy who is putting together like a radio play that I'm doing a voice in, and just little things here and there. Slowly building
your empire.
Yeah. I think one of the first things that I said to you when we started talking on Twitter, eons ago, before I sent you any music or anything like that, was that there's going to be an empire that is going to be built, and you said something like, okay, well, in time, maybe we'll see. I was like, yeah, fine, fair, we'll see.
we're yeah.
You have to aim high.
We got to keep everybody humble. That's our role here in the D&D community.
All right, fine.
Well, again, thank you so much. We'll link to
thank you.
all of those things. We'll signal boost anything that you've got. Everybody, please check out Cinderblock Sally wherever great Cinderblock Sally products can be found. Check the show notes. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep rolling them dice.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right.